Hi there, my name is Taylor, and this is my second project for my Media, Film, and Communications class this semester. This one's going to be all about digital controversies and whether smartphones and modern technology are actually destroying a generation. My generation, in fact. I hope you enjoy. More and more we rely on technology in our everyday lives. What used to be just having a landline or a TV in your house that you gather around after family dinners on Friday nights has turned into half the population of the entire globe having a wealth of information in their pockets at all times. But some people see this as a bad thing, and that this technology is corrupting and destroying a generation of people. In my experience, there are three main issues that people cite as the reason why they believe this. One is a decrease in learning in this generation, an increase in mental health issues, and a decrease in our ability to be social, and we're more isolated than any previous generation. From my personal experience as someone in this generation, digital media certainly has an effect on anyone who uses it, but that's due to the nature of there being social and cultural factors influencing it. But I believe that it's just the natural progression of our society, and that it's creating avenues that are actually making people's lives better and easier. Firstly, it's important to examine the exact nature of the problems that are cited as huge issues that technology has created. A common belief by previous generations is that modern digital media and technology, specifically smartphones, have created a less engaged generation of kids. That this current generation has everything at their fingertips and therefore isn't actually creating memory banks of memorized information that can be applied to problems later in life. It's believed that we pay less attention in school and have it much easier than our parents or grandparents ever did. That therefore we can't solve life's problems unaided. This assumption has over time been strengthened with the convergence of digital media all onto one device. In almost every classroom in the developed world, you'll find students on phones, tablets, laptops, and other technology. Schools even give out iPads and other electronics to kids nowadays. Many people also view this as evidence that this generation is less engaged in learning due to the resources that can be accessed from this technology, like online gaming or social media. There's a misconception that because this technology is in classrooms, it's taking away from the learning process and not actually aiding and helping it. As someone who's a part of this generation, though, my experiences and the experiences of my peers don't reflect these assumptions. Many of these simply stem from a mixture of convergence of media and older generations who do not have experience with modern smartphones and technology. With newer technology, industries that used to be completely separate are now all found on one device. Technological convergence, as defined as generally an enhancement over a previous technical solution by the realization of mutual interdependence on the level of product or artifact from different technical backgrounds, but having a larger impact beyond products just focusing on one technical field. This is to say that convergence is the practice of many forms of technology, all being brought together into one device for the betterment of not just the one product, but for the field as a whole. For example, modern smartphones can now view academic articles, access social media, record lectures, take photos and notes, and more, all in one device. Where this has become a misconception is that older generations often see this technology in classrooms and don't understand the academic resources it provides. I know I personally use this technology in the classroom frequently, whether that's to follow along with lecture slides on my laptop or to take notes on word processing software so I can easily look through them and scan and study quicker later. There's just simply been an adaptation over time by my generation to consume our information differently. A shift in audience from paper books to other resources to technology. Students nowadays are also learning more than ever, reading more books than any previous generation since the 1950s. In America, the percentage of people reading books has been increasing since the 1950s, with only 18% of people reading in the 1950s, and by 2005, it was up to 47%. Our smartphones and technology allow a wide variety of books, including academic readings, to be available at the click of a button, without taking up excess space or the weight of carrying around these textbooks and heavy, thick books, or even just saving paper resources. All in all, technology is just giving this generation more resources and opportunities for learning, not destroying them. The second issue often cited when discussing why this generation is being destroyed is the increase in mental health in this age group more than any other age group. There's a fear that smartphones and technology have increased a multitude of different mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, mood disorders, ADHD, and just in general decrease their ability to focus and to have patience and to remember things. An article by Jean Twenge in The Atlantic reverberates this exact sentiment, saying, "But the smartphone, its blue light glowing in the dark, is likely playing a nefarious role." These sorts of statements only increase the growing fear among the public that smartphones and digital technology are dangerous and destroying a generation of kids. People who believe in the sentiment also cite academic articles that look at statistics of mental health rates and attribute that to technology. It is true that between 2009 and 2017, the number of high schoolers who contemplated suicide increased by 25%, and the number of teens diagnosed with clinical depression grew 37% between 2015 and 2014. I know that if I was told smartphones were destroying teens and I saw these statistics, without any further analysis, I would definitely be convinced. Other articles include Twenge's own study from 2017, finding a 0.5 correlation between social media use and depression symptoms. But again, this is interpreted as causation and looked at as proof to reinforce the idea that my generation is being destroyed. Now, I will not try and say that smartphones have no impact, but if analyzed critically, it can be seen that the data that's used to support these claims isn't as solid as believed, and my generation isn't on the brink of destruction. The reality is that technology and we as a society do not exist in a vacuum, and our technology, our behavior, our communication are impacted by a variety of social and cultural factors, as seen in the encoding and decoding model of communication. As well, a change in a person's mental health is never solely just because of one factor. There is a multitude of factors that go into a person's mental health and their state. So for us to say that technology is solely the cause of this increase in mental health conditions that we're seeing would be incorrect. I think we need to look critically at about what else in our society could be having an impact. From my personal experience, it's not technology that is creating anxiety and depression, but rather a multitude of different things, including family expectations, if a person's family life at home is not in a great state, if they're having issues at school, and so many other things. If we are able to look critically, then we can maybe see that this generation has just been raised in a different world than the previous generations, and as a result is reacting differently. Now, to look at the standpoint of there being scientific evidence that smartphones and technology are causing these issues, the studies that do exist often don't show causation or the direction of association. For example, the previously mentioned study that Twenge does show a correlation between social media use and depressive symptoms. But again, this is correlation, not causation. You could say that phones are causing depression, but you could also say that people are depressed or just using phones and technology more. When there's a correlation, you can't link a cause and effect like you would if there was a causation. When people use this study as if it were causation, they take on almost an inoculation theory point of view. That is that technology is simply injecting these mental health issues into people without taking into account other factors or causes. These studies are simply not meant to be conclusive on a specific subject, and therefore you can't take them as hard proof of causation. As researcher Amy Orban puts it, we as researchers need to start thinking not about statistical significance, but what is the actual significance of this effect. Their study found that there was more of a correlation between wearing glasses or eating potatoes than there was with digital technology and well-being. That just goes to show that correlation doesn't necessarily mean everything that we might think it does. Many of these studies are also conducted in manners that could significantly change the results since they're not being done clinically. But the problem with this comes is only 1/3 of people have been found to accurately self-report, which means there could be a huge discrepancy in the data that you're collecting through self-reporting and the data that you could collect clinically. All in all, it's important that we examine this concern raised that smartphones are causing mental health concerns with a more critical lens as to actually pull apart the stereotype that a generation is being destroyed. The last big issue that I wanted to talk about that's often been brought up when we're talking about this debate is that teens in this generation are more isolated and they're less capable of social interactions than any other group. I, as a member of this generation myself, I do acknowledge that I spend plenty of time on my electronics like many of my friends do. And from this, it is just deemed that this time being spent on smartphones and media electronics is creating isolation and decreasing our ability to be social. As well, the issue of audience fragmentation plays a vital role in understanding where this concern stems from. As technology has given us more and more choices, we've been allowed to get more demanding, and we spread out into many different outlets to get exactly the media we want. This is seen as my generation spending less time together in person and more time on smartphones where we can access these specific niche communities that we desire, making it look like we're being isolated. The worry is that if this continues, we will lose the ability to interact socially, with the average smartphone user checking their phone at least 47 times a day, and 80% of users checking their phones within an hour of waking up or going to sleep, 35% within 5 minutes. It's definitely fair to say that smartphones play a large part in many people's lives today. As well, though, it's also been found that 85% of total smartphone users have checked their phones while talking with a friend or family member. So it could be connected that this excessive checking of smartphones could be due to feeling uncomfortable in that social interaction and then fuels this argument. Even though I'm totally guilty of checking my phone while talking casually with a friend or checking it after I get up in the morning, I wouldn't say that that makes me not able to act socially appropriate or has made me isolated. I think that these statistics and that behavior just demonstrates that there's been an incorporation of smartphones into our everyday lives. For me, checking my phone in the morning isn't jumping back online to isolate myself, but rather checking if there's any communication that needs to be addressed, like an important email. It's me interacting socially. This is not a lack of social understanding, but rather a new extension of what it means to be social in the first place. While at one point in time, being professional or socially apt meant organizing in-person meetings, the truth of how our society has become structured is that interacting with smartphones and technology is just a part of being social now. For example, job interviews. While it used to be standard that you would go in person to the store or the company where you were applying, now in my experiences, stores will go and tell you to apply online even if you go in person with a resume. That's just how the system works now. This shows the change from simply how we communicate and interact socially, not the destruction of a social interaction completely. These beliefs are also exacerbated by the digital divide that exists now. That meaning that there's a divide between those who can use technology effectively and easily and those who don't have access to or aren't able to use technology for whatever reason. There are a bunch of factors that can go into this, including cost, technical availability, geographical barriers, physical barriers, or generational barriers, and there's even more. The list goes on and on. The generational factor specifically plays a role in how the younger generation is viewed in relation to technology, though. If a previous generation does not possess this understanding of everything digital technology and smartphones are capable of, they are likely to assume that any use of smartphones is taking away from social interaction and that any screen time is negative, because they don't have a complete understanding of what it's capable of. If we're able to look at why these assumptions and beliefs are in place, then they can be deconstructed, and it can be seen that, again, this generation isn't being destroyed. Our society is just changing. In conclusion, I guess, smartphones and current technology are most definitely having an effect on those who use them. But this effect is simply the result of a growing and evolving society rather than that we're being destroyed. I think if we can said that we're being destroyed, then I think we're also condemning all future generations as well. If the most widely used reasons for this alarm, decreasing interest in learning, an increase in mental health issues, and a lack of social interaction are examined critically, it becomes apparent that these beliefs are either adaptations, misconceptions, or assumptions fueled by those who aren't informed. In my experience, technology has made so many positive impacts, and we need to at least examine critically before jumping to any conclusions.